What's going on, guys? Today's teaching is over HIT versus Liss, so high intensity interval training versus low intensity steady state cardio. I'm going to kind of talk about, defining each, identifying strengths and weaknesses, and then kind of talking about which one's better and maybe which one you should do in your program or moving forward with your journey. So when we talk about Liss, Liss stands for low intensity steady state cardio. So this is going to be something where your heart rate stays pretty consistent throughout the whole time. So, anywhere between, 50 to 75% of your max heart rate is going to be a pretty good zone to stay in. You shouldn't be drifting between a range of like 100 to 160 beats per minute. It should be somewhere, between like probably like a 20, beats per minute range. That way we're staying pretty consistent. Obviously, it's going to crescendo up. When you start, your heart rate's going to be lower, and when you're at that steady state, that's when it should kind of level out and stay, around that range. So when we talk about Liss, things that can be incorporated would be like jogging, biking, elliptical, like rowing, pretty much anything that's like more than a walk, but less than like a full-on run, if that makes sense. So something you can kind of incorporate for longer periods of time, without crapping out, something you can do at relatively the same pace the whole time. So those are going to be some, classic and generic examples. You can get creative with it, but it is kind of, the boring cardio people typically think of. So some benefits of low intensity steady state will be low impact. It's going to be something you can do in a lot of different ways. Like if you went for like a pretty intense hike or something, you can count that something where you're like climbing up a mountain as opposed to just, walking on a path, walking around the neighborhood. And then you're also going to be in your fat burning zone. So I know you're thinking, whoa, rewind. What do you mean fat burning zone? So when your heart rate is about 70 to 75% of your max heart rate, you typically use fat for fuel as opposed to glycogen storage. Your body understands at that time, after a certain period of time, at that intensity after a certain period of time, that, hey, we're probably going to be doing this for a while. Let's shift and use fat stores as opposed to carb or glycogen stores because we're probably going to be here for a little while. So when you do this, your body will be in that fat burning zone. So probably wondering, what's my fat burning zone? To get our max heart rate, you're going to take 220 minus your age. That will be your max heart rate. And then you want to multiply by 0.7 to get that 70%. So mine would be 198 times 0.7. So like 140-ish would be kind of my range. So for me, since I'm younger, like being at 140 beats per minute for a half an hour is going to be really tough. So Liss for me is not something that I typically, rock with. So there's the benefits. There's kind of how you get into that fat burning zone. Some of the negatives are that it can be very time consuming. So if you are somebody that needs quicker workouts, it can be pretty boring because nobody wants to either sit on a treadmill or a bike or a rower for that long. And you may take some time to get into that heart rate zone, along with not being able to maintain that heart rate zone for very long. So like using myself as an example again, I'm not in great cardio shape, and I understand that. For me to be at 140, 150 beats per minute for a half an hour on the treadmill is kind of challenging, and either my muscles don't like it, my lungs just don't like it. So figuring out, what works for you best is going to be an important factor here. And maybe you can't spend an hour running. I can't. Maybe you spend 20 minutes running. That's a good place to start. So figuring out, where you can fit this cardio in, what methods you enjoy. Maybe you like to swim. Maybe you like to jog. Maybe you like to bike. So figuring out which ones are going to work best for you is important in this scenario. So, okay, so we're talking high intensity interval training. I'm going to call it HIT for simplicity's sake. This is going to be something with shorter, higher intensity bouts followed by either lower intensity bouts or full-on rest periods. So looking at some examples, you could think about like 400 repeats if you were a sprinter. You run 100 meters as fast as you can, and then you walk the next 300. Or if you're doing rowing sprints on a rower, you row for a little while, and then you either rest or after your sprint, you do a very low intensity row for 100 meters. Something along those lines where you're going very hard for a shorter period of time, and then you're going either very easy or resting completely for another short period of time. So it's like, instead of our steady state, you're going up and down and up and down. So your heart rate is going to be jacked up, and then for 30 seconds, you're going to be able to recover or whatever mode or amount of time that you are using in your example. So On top of that, you can do things like biking, like a spin class is going to have a lot of up and downs where, you're sprinting and then you're going lower intensity. But same thing with like a Metcon where you're probably doing a lot of high intensity stuff for a few minutes at a time, no rest between exercises, and then you get to rest for like a minute or two at the end of the, at the end of the circuit. So these are going to be things that there's a ton of options for. Like you can get super creative with your HIIT workouts because you can really just think about like, what am I going to do that I'm going to hate that I can rest for in the middle, and you can really make it suck. So if you think about things like that, like I do, like you can definitely have fun with some HIIT. So when it comes to benefits of HIIT training, number one, it takes a lot less time. The amount of things you can do in 20 minutes of HIIT compared to like 60 minutes of Liss, the balance of how much time you spend. So if you are somebody that requires shorter workouts, or if you're super busy, HIIT's probably going to be the better option for you most of the time. It can help with athletic performance because of the modes that you typically use. So a lot more sprinting, a lot more plyometrics, powerful movements. So if you're somebody that wants to train for athletics, it's a pretty good option as well. And then you can burn extra calories after your workout through the effects of EPOC. So I know you're thinking again, wait, rewind. What do you mean you can burn calories for 2 days after your workout? So there's this phenomenon called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC. So it essentially says that when you get your heart rate up to a certain level, or if you get your oxygen consumption to a certain level and you hit that threshold, it's different for everybody. It's pretty, the science behind it is sound, but it's up in the air, and research going either way between HIIT or Liss being better for it. So essentially when you hit that threshold, your body has to work overtime to either help rebuild and to help rebuild muscle fibers, to put oxygen back where it needs to go, to replenish glycogen stores. So kind of rebuilding your body back to where it was before. Your body has to work overtime if you put it in a position to where you break it down enough through HIIT or Liss to where, you hit that. So it uses aerobic pathways where we require oxygen, as opposed to anaerobic pathways, which do not, in order to perform all that recovery and that repair. So when you hit that, your body burns extra calories going through all those processes trying to replenish glycogen and do all the stuff I just talked about. So one thing to note here is that it is something that you can evoke from low intensity steady state cardio as well. But because of our intensity being jacked up and our time frame being lower, you typically see it with HIIT more often because most people aren't doing enough Liss to evoke those changes or evoke that effect. So yes, you can do it with Liss, but also it's typically easier and something that's more prevalent with HIIT because of the intensity threshold, because of the amount of time you spend in that higher intensity zone. Your muscles and your oxygen consumption is typically higher for that shorter period of time. So negatives of HIIT: it's going to be harder on your joints. It's going to require you to push yourself a lot because sprinting or doing really high intensity exercise over and over and over again is really hard. It really does require a lot of mental taxation. It's going to be harder on your joints. It's going to tax your central nervous system a lot. So if you were one of those people that came to us before doing a ton of HIIT and you couldn't lose weight, your stress levels were probably really high. Your central nervous system probably was never recovering, and that was probably a big factor as to why. So it can be very taxing on your CNS, and you do need to be careful with how much of it you're doing, and it should not make up like the bulk of your training program. So now that we kind of know which is which, what the benefits, what the negatives are, what the effects are, we can talk about which one's better for you. Which one is better, HIIT or Liss? In terms of, well, just looking at them overall, I think the goal of most people's cardio routine is to burn fat. These are going to both have similar effects on your overall cardiovascular health. So your heart will be stronger, you'll have better blood flow, you'll be able to move oxygen around quicker, you can pump more blood more frequently, you can pump more oxygen and nutrients through that blood. You're going to get in better shape cardiovascular wise. You're going to be able to do more without getting out of breath as easily. So all those effects are going to be similar between either or. So when it comes to which one's better, like everything we talk about, guys, there's not really a one size fits all answer. So HIIT has its benefits. If you're somebody that has a very restrictive time schedule, HIIT's probably going to be your go-to option because 20 minutes of HIIT versus 20 minutes of jogging on the treadmill is going to give you more of a benefit. Now, if you have an hour and a half a day, you can go on a long run, or if you can go on a long bike ride, that's awesome. If you like doing that, do Liss. I typically tell people, obviously I program stuff in, but the cardio that works best for you is the cardio that you will actually do. And then going off that, there is conflicting research showing one being better for this and then the other one being better for the same thing. So most of it is pretty in the middle. Like there's not like a huge sway either way of like, do not ever do HIIT cardio if your goal is this, or do not ever do Liss cardio if your goal is that. But the statistical significance and the differences is there, but I don't think it's something that should be like a game-changing decision for you. The effects of EPOC can be achieved through both. Like I mentioned, you typically see them more with HIIT because of the amount of time people spend in that higher intensity zone. But again, you can achieve the same results either way. It's just going to depend which you enjoy, which one you can stick with, which one your body can handle, and which one you feel that works best for you. So that's it for me, guys. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, let me or Caleb know. But I wanted to go over this one as it's been a while since we've covered it, and I thought this was something that a lot of you guys are probably wondering about. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.